While thousands of fans lined the streets of Clearwater, Florida to pay their respects to Hulk Hogan, the most shocking story from his funeral wasn't who was there, it was who wasn't. The same WWE executives and wrestlers who flooded social media with tributes after his death were nowhere to be found when it actually mattered. Roman Reigns, absent. Triple H, missing in action. The current WWE roster that supposedly learned everything from the Hulkster. They were busy with house shows and couldn't be bothered to attend the funeral of the man who built the foundation their careers stand on. But here's what's going to make your blood boil. WWE sent flowers. That's right, the billion-dollar company that made hundreds of millions off Hogan's name and likeness sent a flower arrangement instead of having their top executives attend the funeral of their most iconic star. The arrangement cost less than what WWE spends on catering for one television taping. Meanwhile, wrestling legends from competing promotions, retired wrestlers living on Social Security, and fans who saved up their last dollars to travel across the country showed up to honor a man who gave his life to this business. The contrast exposed everything wrong with modern WWE and their treatment of the legends who built their empire. The funeral service at Countryside Baptist Church could have held 2,000 people, but WWE's absence was so obvious that local news reporters started asking questions. Where was Stephanie McMahon, who posted a heartfelt Instagram tribute calling Hogan family? Where was Nick Khan, who runs the company Hogan helped make billions? Where were the wrestlers who claimed Hogan was their inspiration and hero? The answer is as disgusting as it is predictable: they were protecting their brand image. Attending Hogan's funeral meant being photographed at the service of a controversial figure, and WWE's corporate cowards couldn't risk the association. They were perfectly happy to post safe social media tributes, but actually showing up and being seen honoring Hogan. Too risky for their carefully managed public relations. But the fans noticed everything. Social media exploded with side-by-side photos of WWE's tribute posts next to empty seats at the funeral that should have been filled with company executives. The hashtag WWE cowards started trending as wrestling fans documented the hypocrisy in real time. The most heartbreaking moment came when Hogan's daughter Brooke looked out at the congregation and visibly searched for faces that weren't there. Sources close to the family report that she specifically asked about certain WWE figures who had promised to attend but never showed up. The disappointment in her eyes told the whole story about how wrestling's biggest company treats its legends when the cameras aren't rolling. Even worse, WWE tried to minimize their absence by claiming they were respecting the family's wishes for privacy. *T. The family had publicly announced that wrestling figures were welcome and encouraged to attend. WWE's excuse was as transparent as it was insulting to everyone's intelligence. While WWE's current roster and executives were missing in action, the wrestling legends who actually showed up proved what real respect and loyalty look like. Stone Cold Steve Austin flew in from Texas and sat in the third row, tears streaming down his face during the entire service. The Rock, despite filming commitments, chartered a private jet to attend and served as one of the pallbearers. Mick Foley, who has struggled financially in recent years, spent money he couldn't afford to attend the funeral because Hogan deserved to have his wrestling family there. His presence meant more than any corporate flower arrangement ever could. But here's the part that will restore some faith in wrestling: legends from every era showed up. Ric Flair, despite his own health issues, was wheeled in to pay his respects. Bret Hart, who had very public feuds with Hogan over the years, put aside their differences and delivered one of the most moving eulogies about respecting your fellow wrestlers regardless of personal conflicts. Even wrestlers from competing promotions showed up to honor Hogan's contributions to the entire industry. AEW stars like Jon Moxley and CM Punk attended despite knowing it might create political issues with their current employer. Their presence showed that some wrestlers still understand what loyalty and respect actually mean. The international wrestling community was represented by legends from Japan, Mexico, and Europe who flew across oceans to attend. These wrestlers, many of whom only worked with Hogan a few times, understood that his funeral was bigger than company politics or personal grudges. Outside the church, over 3,000 fans had gathered to pay their respects, creating a scene that should have been WWE's biggest priority and marketing opportunity. Instead, the company treated the fan gathering like an embarrassment to be ignored rather than a testament to Hogan's lasting impact. These weren't casual observers or curiosity seekers. These were hardcore wrestling fans who had traveled from across the country, spending their own money and using vacation days to honor a wrestler who meant everything to them. Many were wearing vintage Hulkamania t-shirts from the 1980s, some had brought championship replica belts, and others held handmade signs with personal messages about how Hogan inspired their lives. The most touching displays came from fans who had met Hogan at conventions, autograph signings, or chance encounters over the years. They shared stories of his kindness, his willingness to take photos, and his genuine appreciation for their support. These interactions, which meant nothing to WWE's bottom line, meant everything to the people whose lives Hogan touched. But here's what should infuriate every wrestling fan. WWE's social media team was posting generic content and promotional material while thousands of fans were gathering to mourn one of their biggest legends. No acknowledgement of the fan gathering, no live coverage of the memorial, no recognition that something historically significant was happening. Local news outlets did a better job covering the wrestling aspects of the funeral than WWE's own media team. Independent wrestling podcasters provided more respectful coverage than the company that made billions off Hogan's name. The disconnect between WWE's corporate priorities and their fans' emotions has never been more obvious or disgusting. The moment that truly exposed WWE's hypocrisy came during The Rock's eulogy, when he delivered lines that were clearly directed at the company executives who weren't there to hear them. Without mentioning names, The Rock talked about fair weather friends, and people who disappear when loyalty is tested. Terry knew who his real friends were, The Rock said, his voice breaking with emotion. They're the ones sitting in this church today, not the ones posting on social media from thousands of miles away. The congregation erupted in applause, and several wrestlers were seen nodding in agreement while looking around at the conspicuously empty seats. But the most devastating moment came when The Rock addressed Hogan's complicated legacy directly. Terry made mistakes, and he owned them. He spent his final years trying to make amends and rebuild relationships. The people who couldn't find it in their hearts to forgive him, or couldn't risk being seen with him, aren't the leaders this business needs. The speech was clearly aimed at WWE's executives who had erased Hogan from company history for years before quietly bringing him back when it was profitable. The Rock's words highlighted the difference between real forgiveness and corporate calculation, and everyone in that church understood exactly who he was talking about. Social media exploded as clips of The Rock's speech went viral, with wrestling fans interpreting his comments as a direct shot at WWE's management. The company's absence from the funeral, combined with The Rock's pointed remarks, created a public relations nightmare that exposed their hypocrisy to a mainstream audience. Wrestling journalists with backstage sources are reporting that WWE's absence from Hogan's funeral was part of a calculated decision to distance the company from any association with his controversial legacy. Multiple sources confirm that there was an internal memo discouraging WWE personnel from attending the funeral or posting about it extensively on social media. The memo allegedly stated that while individual wrestlers were free to make their own decisions, the company would not officially participate in funeral activities and preferred that employees keep their involvement low-key. This corporate cowardice ensured that WWE could claim they honored Hogan with social media tributes while avoiding any real commitment or risk. But the most damaging revelation is that several current WWE wrestlers wanted to attend the funeral but were pressured not to by company executives. Sources report that Roman Reigns initially planned to attend but was advised against it by his management team, who worried about negative publicity affecting his carefully managed image. Triple H's absence was particularly calculated, according to insider reports. As WWE's head of creative and a key decision-maker in Hogan's erasure from company history, his presence at the funeral would have raised uncomfortable questions about the company's treatment of their legends. His team reportedly decided that the risk wasn't worth any potential positive publicity. The most infuriating detail is that WWE executives were monitoring social media coverage of the funeral to assess whether their absence was creating negative publicity. They were literally calculating the public relations impact of not honoring one of their biggest legends at his own funeral. WWE's absence from Hogan's funeral became an international embarrassment when wrestling promotions from around the world showed more class and respect than the American company Hogan helped build. New Japan Pro Wrestling sent a representative who delivered a formal statement honoring Hogan's contributions to international wrestling. Impact Wrestling, despite their smaller budget and resources, sent multiple executives and wrestlers to attend the funeral. Their presence highlighted WWE's absence and made the billion-dollar company look petty and small by comparison. Wrestling fans immediately noticed the contrast and used it to criticize WWE's corporate culture. Even more embarrassing was the presence of representatives from Mexican wrestling promotions, European wrestling organizations, and independent American companies that have a fraction of WWE's resources but understood that respecting legends transcends business considerations. International wrestling media covered WWE's absence as a major story, with publications in Japan, the UK, and Mexico running articles about the company's failure to honor one of wrestling's biggest stars. The global wrestling community was watching, and WWE's reputation suffered damage that extended far beyond American audiences. The contrast became even more stark when international wrestling figures who had only brief interactions with Hogan made the effort to attend, while WWE executives who worked with him for decades stayed away. The message was clear: WWE values corporate image over human decency and loyalty. While WWE executives were too cowardly to attend Hogan's funeral, the company had no problem continuing to profit from his death through merchandise sales that reached disgusting new levels during the funeral weekend. The same day thousands gathered to mourn Hogan, WWE launched a limited edition funeral memorial collection that included items specifically designed to capitalize on the emotional moment. The timing was so offensive that even WWE's supporters were calling it out on social media. Launching new Hogan merchandise on the day of his funeral, while refusing to send company representatives to the service, showed a level of corporate cynicism that shocked even cynical wrestling fans. The most disgusting item was a "Hulkamania Lives Forever" T-shirt featuring imagery from the funeral coverage, including photos of the church and fan gatherings that WWE didn't even bother to attend. They were literally profiting off a funeral they considered too risky to participate in. Sales numbers leaked by industry sources show that WWE made more money from Hogan merchandise during his funeral weekend than they had in any comparable period while he was alive. The company found a way to profit from his death while avoiding any of the responsibilities that come with honoring a legend. The fan backlash was immediate and brutal. Reviews of the funeral merchandise were flooded with comments about WWE's hypocrisy and greed. The company's social media posts about the new items received overwhelmingly negative responses from fans who were disgusted by the timing and opportunism. In the weeks leading up to Hogan's funeral, multiple WWE figures had privately assured his family that they would attend the service. These promises, made during condolence calls and through intermediaries, created expectations that were ultimately shattered when funeral day arrived. Sources close to the Hogan family report that Brooke and Nick Hogan had prepared remarks acknowledging specific WWE figures who were expected to attend. The family had reserved seating sections for WWE personnel and had coordinated with funeral organizers to accommodate what they expected to be a significant company presence. The most heartbreaking detail is that Terry Hogan had specifically mentioned wanting certain WWE figures at his funeral during his final weeks. Family members report that he spoke about hoping to see Roman Reigns, Triple H, and other current stars at his service, viewing their potential presence as validation that his contributions to wrestling were still valued. When funeral day arrived and those seats remained empty, family members were forced to make last-minute adjustments to their planned remarks. The disappointment was visible and painful, turning what should have been a celebration of Hogan's life into a reminder of how wrestling's current leadership treats its legends. The broken promises weren't just disappointing, they were cruel to a grieving family who had been led to believe that their father and husband's wrestling family would be there to support them. WWE's executives made commitments they never intended to keep, using condolence calls as public relations opportunities rather than genuine expressions of support. Behind the scenes, current WWE wrestlers are reportedly furious about being prevented from attending Hogan's funeral, with several planning to speak publicly about the company's calculated decision to avoid the service. Multiple sources describe a locker room in revolt over WWE's treatment of the situation and their legends in general. Younger wrestlers who grew up watching Hogan are particularly angry about missing the opportunity to pay their respects to someone who inspired their careers. Many feel that WWE's corporate cowardice robbed them of a meaningful moment and forced them to choose between their careers and their personal values. Female wrestlers within WWE are reportedly split on the situation, with some understanding the company's concerns about Hogan's controversial past while others believe that death should have transcended those issues. The internal debate has created tension and divisions that weren't present before Hogan's passing. Black wrestlers in WWE face the most complex emotions, with some feeling relieved that they weren't pressured to attend the funeral of someone whose racist comments were well documented, while others believe that forgiveness and moving forward required showing up when it mattered most. The most damaging reports suggest that several wrestlers are considering speaking publicly about WWE's funeral policy and their treatment of legends in general. These potential revelations could expose even more uncomfortable truths about the company's corporate culture and priorities. Wrestling fans have rendered a harsh but fair judgment on WWE's handling of Hogan's funeral, and the verdict will follow the company for years to come. Social media remains flooded with comparisons between WWE's absent executives and the legends who showed up to honor their fallen colleague. The fan-created documentation of who attended versus who was missing has become a permanent record of WWE's priorities and values. Photos from the funeral, showing emotional tributes from legends while highlighting empty seats reserved for current company figures, tell a story that no amount of corporate spin can change. Perhaps most damaging is the generational impact of WWE's absence. Younger wrestling fans who witnessed the company's calculated avoidance of Hogan's funeral now understand that WWE's tributes and loyalty statements are marketing material rather than genuine expressions of respect. The international wrestling community's response has been particularly harsh, with promotions and wrestlers from around the world using WWE's absence as an example of everything wrong with American wrestling's corporate culture. The company's reputation has suffered damage that extends far beyond their traditional audience. Most significantly, WWE has lost moral authority with their own wrestlers and fans. Future tributes and memorial moments will be viewed through the lens of their Hogan funeral absence, with audiences questioning whether any expression of respect from the company is genuine or calculated. The ramifications of WWE's decision to skip Hogan's funeral extend far beyond one day of bad publicity. The company has set a precedent that legends are disposable when they become inconvenient, and that corporate image matters more than human decency and loyalty. Future WWE legends now understand exactly how they'll be treated if they become controversial or problematic. The message is clear: the company will profit from your name and likeness while you're useful, erase you when you become a liability, and skip your funeral if attending becomes politically risky. Current wrestlers have learned that WWE's expressions of loyalty and family are conditional and calculated. The company's absence from Hogan's funeral has destroyed the illusion that WWE treats its performers as anything more than business assets to be managed and eventually discarded. The financial implications are also becoming apparent. Merchandise sales have plateaued as fans refuse to buy items from a company they view as disloyal and opportunistic. Attendance at live events in markets with strong Hogan nostalgia has declined as older fans express disgust with WWE's behavior. Most importantly, WWE has damaged relationships with wrestling legends who are still alive. Seeing how the company treated Hogan's funeral has caused other retired wrestlers to reconsider their relationships with WWE and their willingness to participate in company programming or events. Hulk Hogan's funeral exposed truths about modern wrestling that fans suspected but had never seen so clearly demonstrated. WWE's calculated absence revealed a company that values corporate image over human decency, profit over loyalty, and public relations over genuine respect for the legends who built their empire. The contrast between the legends who showed up and the executives who stayed away will be remembered as a defining moment in wrestling history. It showed the difference between wrestlers who understand brotherhood and loyalty versus corporate figures who view everything through the lens of risk management and brand protection. For wrestling fans, Hogan's funeral became a moment of clarity about what WWE truly values and how they actually treat their legends when the cameras aren't rolling. The empty seats reserved for company executives told a story that no amount of social media tributes could contradict. The wrestling community lost more than just Hulk Hogan on July 24, 2025. They lost their illusions about WWE's values, their faith in corporate expressions of loyalty, and their belief that the company actually cares about the legends who built their success. But they gained something too: absolute clarity about which wrestling figures have genuine character and which ones are just playing corporate games. The funeral attendance list became a permanent record of who has real integrity in wrestling and who just talks about it for publicity. The thousands of fans who showed up to honor Hogan, the legends who flew across the country to pay their respects, and the international wrestling figures who understood that some things transcend business considerations proved that real wrestling values still exist. They just don't exist in WWE's corporate offices. What's your take on WWE's disgraceful absence from Hogan's funeral? Can you ever trust their tributes and loyalty statements again, knowing how they actually behave when it matters? The wrestling community is having the conversation WWE hoped to avoid, and the verdict on their character is devastating and permanent. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Wrestling News CC family, where the real stories of WWE come to life. See you in the next one.